Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Aether Hub. I'm Simon, bringing you another Magic the Gathering video. So today's video is a little bit of a different take. Typically you guys know me for MTG lore and story analysis, but today I want to bring you guys some news that maybe more casual fans of the story or the game may have missed. Something that I'm pretty nervous about, and I wanted to share those feelings with you guys. Old school players of the game, or just nerds in general, may remember way back in the day that Magic the Gathering had their own line of comic books and graphic novels to go along with some of their media written works that sort of went into detail of what was going on in any given set. Back then, players were enticed to pick up these comic books because oftentimes they would contain actual cards in them. Like, you'd just be flipping through the pages and out would drop like an alternate art version of a card, and it would be yours. I know this happened at least a few times in the IDW when they were publishing Magic the Gathering comic books with Dak Fayden back in like 2012, and I remember thinking that it was a really clever way to get some MTG players who weren't really interested in the story of MTG to get out there and give it a shot. If you can't already tell, I'm rambling a lot about this topic, and yes, we're actually talking about the history, the failures, and the future ambitions of the MTG comic book series. You think MTG is a fantasy universe full of magic, compelling worlds, and characters. It could be a slam dunk premise for a graphic novel, right? And for the most part, it was, but it certainly wasn't without its bumps, especially some pretty dodgy work there. In the earlier years, for example, it was published by Armada, starting with Arabian Nights and going through almost every age of Dominarian history, not completely covered in a larger novel. Now, I didn't grow up reading those comic books, but picking them up later on in my MTG tenure, I thought they were a lot of fun, and it got me really excited to discover what other MTG comic books were out there. That was until I discovered the series by IDW. So I'm by no means a comic book nerd, and I use that term nerd with the utmost respect. I mean, come on! I make YouTube videos about the story of a fantasy trading card game almost exclusively, so I have zero room to call anyone a nerd, but comic books just aren't something I ever really got into, so if I show my ignorance while just sitting here and talking to you guys about this topic, I'm just letting you know ahead of time that I'm definitely not an expert. I don't know what other work IDW has done in the world of comic books, but surely they're a major player in that arena, and that prior work landed them a contract with Wizards of the Coast to cover a short adventure following the planeswalker Dak Fayden as he travels the multiverse uncovering hidden plots and stopping some nasty villains. Dak Fayden became like the de facto comic book character for the MTG universe, though he didn't get too much in-game love, either in the physical game or the main story. He became a brand in and of himself, bringing the story of MTG to an audience that overlapped with those who also loved graphic novels. Now, I'm not saying exactly that the IDW published series with Dak Fayden was all bad, but I did find them a bit boring. Most of this series focused on building up a mystery, or slowly unfolding the true plot that had to be uncovered, followed by very brief stints of action. I mean, it makes sense. Dak Fayden isn't some kind of generic warrior character. He's a thief and a sneak, so of course subtlety is more prized than action-packed combat. But I also know I've read stories of suspense, tension, and mystery before, and they can always seem to keep me compelled to continue reading. However, these comics were a little lacking in that magic. Like I said, I'm not a comic book expert, but I just found that the writing never really drew me in. And all of that came to a head as the IDW comics featuring Dak Fayden came to a screeching and sudden stop. The story of Theros, in which Dak was looking for a way to stop a plague of nightmares brought forth by the planeswalker Ashiok, never really had a conclusion. The series ended with Dak entering the underworld of Theros, looking for aid in his fight against this foe. I think he was looking for like a prophesized artifact or maybe help from the gods. Something like that. But the thing that matters is that the story never finished. And if there's one thing I really despise, it's an unfinished story. And I believe it was this tragedy that directly led to Dak Fayden's death in War of the Spark. Yeah, I know, where's my tin hat, right? But I'm being serious. The IDW comics and their lack of an engaging experience and sales meant that the story didn't continue, and the fate of Dak Fayden was basically wrapped up super quickly by other mediums saying simply that Dak escaped the underworld, traded some gauntlets he found there for someone who could cure him of his nightmare curse. It wasn't really explored, it wasn't explained, it wasn't really fleshed out. It was just, hey, he got out, he cured himself, and boom, he went to Ravnica because why not? And that's pretty much it. Sometime later, the War of the Spark would happen and Dak Fayden, the character, would be killed off forever, not even given his own card in that set proper, and essentially he was killed off screen. Yeah, they tried to make it an emotional moment as one of the very few major planeswalkers to actually bite the dust in this major conflict, and really the only hero outside of Gideon that people may have actually cared about. But it just didn't work, and it certainly didn't bring any sense of fulfillment to those who actually enjoyed the comic series. Wizards of the Coast, in my opinion, burnt that bridge with fans who actually enjoyed that medium as their source of the story. The IDW comics just didn't perform well, and in disgrace they had to kill off the character most associated with that series, as they never really have to answer the question, what about Dak? So with Dak Fayden dead, Wizards of the Coast decides to move forward with a different angle in MTG Comics, and this time adopting the strategy of using a well-established and loved character to try and push this new means of storytelling. Enter the IDW publication of Chandra. Now, I think this was a very logical move, right? Take a character people already knew and loved and use it to really go hard in pushing comics. Get people excited again, revive this slowly dying avenue for Wizards of the Coast. Only problem was that they let IDW take another crack at it. And like I said, guys, I don't really know much about the different writers and the previous work and the publications and all this kind of stuff. And I don't really know how much Wizards was actually involved in the project. What I do know is that the end product was not very good. It was slow, boring, and nothing ever seemed to happen. Not only that, but the comics took forever to come out. The production was just so slow. How do you expect to keep anyone's interest in a story that is slow to come out and nothing ever really happens in the story for over a year? It's just not a recipe for success. And with that, another strike to the goodwill of consumers came as the next planned series of Chandra's comics were just cancelled, likely due to sagging sales. It was an interesting premise, a story that followed a despondent Chandra Nalar after the War of the Spark as she seeks to find her own internal spark, that thing that kept her going that makes her so uniquely her. It was an answer to a question a lot of us were seeking at that point. What are these big heroes doing after such a massive event like the War of the Spark? But a good premise cannot save bad writing, and so Chandra was added to the list of comic book blunders that seemed to be stacking pretty high for Wizards of the Coast. But this isn't totally a video about the doom and gloom of Magic the Gathering's failures. Now I want to remain hopeful and optimistic, because Wizards of the Coast is getting right back into the comic book saddle and giving it another go with a new series announced for and set to launch in April of 2021. So as we turn away from the dreadful past, how can we hope that this new series is going to fare any better? Well, for one, and this is big, a new publisher has been brought on by Wizards to take on the story. Boom Studios. Now, as I've said, I don't know anything about comic books really, so I don't want to make an overarching statement like Boom Studios is better than IDW. All I know is that Boom Studios is at least not IDW, so we'll get something different. And since IDW bombed their last two series, really switching up publishers is a very good first start. We also know that the story will be something similar to what was told in the Chandra series, exploring the events directly following the War of the Spark. From the information provided by the publisher and the writers, it sounds like we explore a post-war Ravnica in which the guilds with their new guildmasters are sort of finding their way within this new and changed landscape, both physically and politically. Now, the blurb provided itself doesn't really say it's in a post-War of the Spark era, but it follows Vraska, Kaya, and Ralzeric as they're the guildmasters of their various guilds for the War of the Spark, as they're working together to track down a cabal of assassins who are plaguing the great plain-wide city of Ravnica. It's teased that it leads right into a climactic showdown with a major MTG villain, but their identity isn't known at this point. The blurb also said that these three characters are going to make their way to Zendikar at some point. So it's this weird story that a bunch of assassins are targeting specific planeswalkers on Ravnica after War of the Spark, but they're being tracked by characters who can also planeswalk. So we don't know if it's a planeswalker involved or it's a group led by a planeswalker. We're not sure yet, but it's really going to be an interesting story, especially seeing these characters and how they're evolving and developing after War of the Spark. And that's where we are, guys. Magic the Gathering is coming out with another series of comics titled simply Magic. And we'll see if they can find success this time around, and certainly I'm really hoping for the best. Now my question to you guys is, would you guys want to see me cover the content of this comic book series on the channel? I haven't really covered the comic book stuff here before, so I'm curious at what you guys might be interested in. Just go ahead and leave your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching and enjoying the content, and if you did enjoy this video, why not throw the video a like, subscribe, and tick that notification bell. You can also support us over on Patreon, where you get perks like videos early, monthly signed cards, and way more. Check out all those perks linked in the description below. And as always, guys, thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, see ya.